Before Liberty's win at Charleston Southern last night, I had a chance to catch up with the News and Advance's Chris Lang on Tuesday to talk about the Flames. We kind of review the Flames to this point, as well as talk about what was going right, what needs some improvement, and Dale Layer. What type of job has he done with his team? It's Chris Lang on the Sports Buffet Podcast.
Always a treat to have Chris Lang on the Sports Buffet Podcast. Liberty beat writer, Big South expert, just good guy extraordinaire, and he's joining us today to talk about the Liberty Flames. Chris, so far, based on what the Flames knew at the beginning of the year, are they where they thought they would be? Are they disappointed? Have they even overachieved?
Oh, they certainly haven't overachieved. I think there's a level of disappointment. When you lose a guy like John Brown, and I know it sounds like an excuse, but you can't take a cog like that off of a team at this level where you don't have, Duke and Carolina can plug those guys in with guys that were, McDonald's All-Americans off the bench, things like that. They may be more inexperienced, but they're completely talented. There was no second John Brown on this team, and certainly the one guy that was closest to potentially being that, Sami Agugwe, ends up blowing out his knee before the season starts too. So I think that there were some concerns that they were going to, struggle, drop middle of the pack. I thought that dropped them. Those two injuries dropped them from maybe, being picked third or fourth in the conference to maybe fifth or sixth. And now they just struggle to get any real consistency going, and they are sitting at 4-9 heading into the last 5 conference games.
But a lot of those games, just by looking at scores, if you just look at scores, you would say they could easily, be 7-6, 8-5, something like that. Tell me what Dale Layer can take out of this team that he can smile about and be positive about.
You're right about that. Probably both of the Winthrop games they should have won, honestly. They had a 9-point lead at home against Winthrop, against a team that had no confidence on offense, and they couldn't close them out. The game down there where they never win, I've been on this beat 6+ years now, and I've never seen them win a game at Winthrop. They had a decent lead in the first half and had 4 just horrendous minutes to start the second half, and that ends up costing the game. And then the Presbyterian game at home was probably one that they're kicking themselves on they should have had. But what he can take is that the guys haven't quit, and that'll happen at this level sometimes where, you're expected to do some things. You were second place in the conference last year. Things are going completely against them. They really only got blown out of one game, and that was the Asheville game down there. And Asheville's beating the heck out of a lot of people. That's the reason they're 13-1 and the best team in this league by far. So, you can take that out of it, that they're continuing to fight. They're trying to put something together so they can have some sort of answer in that last week of February and maybe pull a surprise run through the tournament.
If there are any fans out there that are disappointed with Dale Layer or, doubting Dale Layer, give me a reason or reasons that they should not doubt Dale Layer and reasons that he is, going to succeed with this program long term.
Well, the guy was the conference coach of the year last year. He didn't unlearn how to coach in one season. He took a couple of really bad injuries and things that made it very difficult. And it was the timing of the injuries, too. It wasn't just that he had guys injured. He loses Evan Gordon. He loses him to transfer back in March. That was known. He thought he addressed that by picking up Tavares Speaks from the JUCO route. And quite honestly, if you look at Gordon versus Speaks, Tavares doesn't score as well off the bounce, but for the most part, they're getting pretty similar production, maybe 2 or 3 points less a game than you got out of Evan Gordon last year, and they're about the same sort of guy on defense. Though Tavares doesn't, he's not as good with stealing balls and everything. But I think that you almost have to give Dale a mulligan for this year because of everything that hit him all at once at the beginning of the preseason. They felt pretty good about themselves after their trip to Europe, and then JB blows his knee out, and it kind of killed their team for this year. So if they're sitting here at 4-9 with a full team next year with a recruiting class and whatnot, then there's absolutely a reason to be concerned. But I think you almost just have to get a mulligan for this year.
Hard to believe it's been 6+ years on the Big South beat, but that'll bring me to my next question. Jesse Sanders, rarely do Liberty people get their name mentioned on SportsCenter like he did earlier in the year. But give me maybe where you would rank Jesse Sanders as a Liberty Flame in your tenure here covering the Flames.
You almost have to think he's right up there. It's tough to compare Jesse Sanders to Larry Blair, for instance, because Larry Blair was the volume shooter who scored a lot of points and was capable of going off for 40 points a game, but he was also capable of having a 5 for 22 sort of night. And Jesse, even on his really bad nights, still seems to impact the game in positive ways. He can do so many different things. He rebounds, he defends, he shoots sometimes, he gets in the lane, gets his teammates involved. He's not a guy that's dependent on one cog of his game. So, as far as you look at overall resumes, I almost think he's got to be the most accomplished player that I've seen come through here, and I don't know how he stacks up against some of the other point guards Carl has. Obviously, I never saw play. I never saw Matt Hildebrand play, so I don't know how he stacks up against those guys. But purely from a number standpoint, you're talking about a 6'3" kid that's a point guard that's going to end up in the top 5 in school history in rebounding. That's pretty special right there. He's a pretty elite player, and I think that he's the sort of guy that can certainly have some success overseas if he chooses to take that route.
I hate to play let's go back in history, but when Richie McKay and Seth Curry left Liberty University almost somewhat, I guess, sort of simultaneously, was this program in bad shape and has it recovered, or how was the program left at that point and where is it now?
Well, I don't think it was in good shape at that point because you had a lot of guys that were talking about leaving, and the problem with Seth Curry was that he had gotten to be much bigger than the team, and I don't think it was really his fault. It's his name. It's the fact that he was the top scoring freshman in the country. It's the natural media hype that comes with that, and the hype from fans, and I don't know if guys were. I don't know if jealous is the word, but if there was any sort of animosity or any sort of trouble in the locker room. But, there were a lot of weird things going on that year between that and Roland Floyd and another guy that was supposed to be a contributor that kind of, ends up leaving at the end of the year. And it was a tough situation for Dale to walk into because I remember when he got hired, he gets hired on of 2000, would it be 2009, 2008? I think 2009. He has to go in and basically re-recruit all of his own players to tell them, look, this thing's going to be stable, it's going to be fine. Then he tried to plug some holes. You remember Evan Gordon was a June signee from Hargrave.
Right.
Wasn't a guy that everybody was rushing to get in the regular part of the recruiting season. So he's had to stabilize this thing, and I think he's trying to build a program on the principles of playing hard on defense and being good team players, and certainly, I just think it's taken a couple of years. There was just a lot of instability between coaches leaving, players leaving, people coming in and out. This next year will be key for him because it'll be his fourth full season or third full season, and he'll have a lot of his own guys in. For the most part, the assistant coaching staff has stayed pretty consistent, aside from Myron Giller leaving before this year, but they have another in-house guy and Matt Ollinger that helps. So it's just going to be I think you just have to ride it out with him for one more year to really judge where this program is, because it was not really in great shape when he came in and took it over.
Do they know, how well is the recruiting class at this point for next year?
Well, they got a couple of kids. The Coronado kid is the one that's really sticks out. He's a big guy, JUCO kid. Got a couple of those guys coming in, and you almost have to at this level. In the Big South, almost everybody has impact JUCO guys. Asheville has one this year with Jeremy Atkinson. Coastal's had a couple of them. Charleston Southern gets them. Campbell gets them. Eric Griffin was a JUCO guy. Winthrop gets them. So you got to have those guys that can come in. Because it's really tough to try to build a team from scratch with a bunch of freshmen and sophomores, as Radford is finding out. Radford's going to be a good team down the road, but man, it's going to take some patience and 2 straight years where they've won 9 games in 2 seasons, and so I don't think the fan base here doesn't have the patience for that. I don't think that Dale can go that route. So bringing in a couple of quality JUCO guys to go along with the freshmen will help.
I'm going to ask you a question that you may not know because I don't know how well your knowledge of the SWAC and the MEAC and conferences like that are. But can Liberty win a game in the NCAA tournament? Obviously, you would think they would probably be in that first four, or a Big South school. I mean, can a Big South school win a game in that first four in the tournament?
Oh, absolutely. Asheville or Coastal, either one of them are built to be very good teams. I really hope that one of those two is the representative of this league coming out of it, because and Campbell could as well, because they've got some size and experience and athletes and guys that can do something in that game. Because you're right, they're going to get paired up with one of those schools, or it's going to be another small conference where the 8 seed comes out of nowhere, wins the tournament, gets to kind of like Arkansas Little Rock did last year that Asheville had to play. But no, UNC Asheville would be a team I don't think I'd want to play if I was somebody in the first round of the NCAA tournament. They're experienced. They've got two guards that have played together for 4 years, that just know each other, and they're not scared of big time competition. They were in that game with Pittsburgh last year for 30 minutes as a 1 seed. So they would be a tough team. They're deep. I think either one of those teams could potentially, with the right draw, do a little damage in this tournament, especially because it just seems like outside of Syracuse and Kentucky, the top, it's just wide open in the major conference part of the basketball season this year. There just doesn't seem to be a ton of dominant teams. You know, I wouldn't be stunned if somebody like Missouri got a 1 seed and really struggled to win their first round game, because they're just not. I just think Kentucky and Syracuse are really the two teams that, if you're a 16 seed, you're like, all right, well, we might as well not even show up.
Right. 2-part question here. Give me the best player on Liberty's team that people really don't know about, and then give me the best player in the Big South that people don't know about. So in other words, I guess what I'm saying is, to take the long way around the parking lot, who are the best under-the-radar guys from Liberty and in the Big South?
Well, if I have to look at it, and that's a tough one, because, you know, the 6 guys, I think most people know about the key guys on Liberty's team. They've got, you know, the 5 starters, and then Thomas Giello is starting to come along. The guy I really like on Liberty's team, that once he gets some experience, and this year's been really good for him, that he's been able to get some games under his belt, is Andrew Smith, the 6'9", 220 freshman forward. He's really only playing 2 or 3 minutes a game, but he's athletic, he's skilled, he can do some things near the basket, he can get a jump shot away from the basket, he can score on people. The key for him is defense and the speed of the game, because I think that's been really tough for him to pick up, coming from kind of a small high school setting. But I think he's going to be a really good player down the road. And honestly, the guy that I'm going to give you 2 guys from UNC Asheville that for some reason people don't talk about, because they just talk about Dickey and Prim, the 2 guards. But both Jeremy Atkinson, their JUCO forward, he's just kind of a double-double guy. He's 6'4". I said to Tim Scarborough the other night, I said, I really wish John Brown was playing in this game, because I'd love to have seen John Brown against Jeremy Atkinson in that matchup with Liberty. But Atkinson just seems to, he's a good defensive player. He gets around the basket and cleans up messes. And then, you know, Chris Stevenson is a guy that because of Dickey and Prim being so good, he just kind of, nobody really talks about him, but he's really athletic. The guy can shoot, the guy can get down the lane. He defends. He's got just kind of a nasty mentality to him. He's a really good player. I think Asheville's pretty loaded over there this year.
Give me your take on 2 quote-unquote local guys, and they're out of Danville. Darren White, who went to Dan Rivers, now at Campbell, and then Nick Barber at High Point, who was a GW grad.
Yeah, Nick Barber's he's an interesting player, because we talked about him when Liberty went down there and played this year, and maybe a couple of years ago he would have been upset. I did see him. Liberty really locked down on him and made it difficult to shoot. He ends up scoring 33 points. That sounds ridiculous to say that, but for the first 7-8 minutes, he was really having trouble getting any sort of opening. And I think he forced one look just to try to get going. But you know, he's not afraid to defer to his teammates a little bit, which is something in the past where I think he would just absolutely try to take over himself, even if the shots weren't there. And at the end of games, he still does that a little bit, but he's not a selfish player by any means. He's a volume scorer. He's a guy that you don't want to let get hot. You just don't want him to get open touches. You have to defend him out to 23, 24 feet, because he's got that sort of range. And if he's really streaky. If he gets going, he can score 15 points in 5 minutes. You don't even realize it. Then with Darren White, I haven't seen him since back in early December. A good player. I think his scoring has come down a little bit. It's steadily decreased since he got off to a really hot start, but he's still a pretty good athletic two-guard in that offense, and they go to him quite a bit, especially if Eric Griffin, the forward, is struggling. So White's he's a guy that I think is going to have a really good senior year next year.
Final question for you, Chris. As always, love having you on. Pretty soon, I guess we've covered Liberty football. We've covered Liberty basketball now. Only one thing left to cover, Washington Capitals. We'll do that in a later podcast. But I'm going to ask you a question about your alma mater, and I'm not talking about Hayfield Secondary School. I'm talking about Virginia Tech. A lot of talk a long time ago is, Gregg Marshall's a Roanoke guy. He was a Big South guy. Now he's in the Missouri Valley. If anything ever happened to him to where he's removed as the coach at Virginia Tech, would Gregg Marshall be a guy to come back, in your opinion, or has his days as a hot ticket kind of passed?
That's an interesting question, and I had forgotten about Gregg Marshall's ties to that area. And we need 45 minutes for me to rant about the Washington Capitals right now anyways. It's a struggle this year. With Marshall, I don't think his star has waned any. He's built a pretty good program in Wichita State. They won the NIT last year, didn't they?
Right. Yeah, they were up there.
Yeah. So it's really that's a tough league to try to get in as an at-large team. Because I'm not saying that the Missouri Valley doesn't get at-large bids. It's just the competition within that league for those 2 or 3 spots is really fierce. And, he's built a good program there. He's had them relevant in the NCAA discussion almost every year. Certainly, I think he might be a guy that if he wanted to make that trip back this way, that Virginia Tech would look at him. I don't think that Seth Greenberg's in any trouble this year. I didn't think that this was a tournament team. He was really young, and they didn't do anything in the non-conference schedule that made you think, other than beating Oklahoma State, who's a lower-level Big 12 team twice, that made you think that this was an NCAA tournament team. I think if he finds a way to stabilize a little bit and get the Hokies to 6-7 ACC wins by the end of the year, and win a game or 2 in the tournament, and get back to the NIT, that's probably a good season for them. And next year will be kind of the test, I think, for Seth Greenberg. But Tech fans have to remember what it was like before him. I think they forget how low this program was before, with Ricky Stokes and Bobby Hussey and guys like that. I mean, they weren't at all. Be careful with what you wish for in regards to Seth Greenberg.
Well, man, I'm not. I agree with you to a sense, but I mean, at the same time, he's had the team on the bubble the last 2 years, and for lack of a better term, has almost complained about how they've gotten jobbed each time, to where I can point to a loss here, a loss there, that you should have taken care of business and gotten in the tournament. But that's for another time too. But do you think this Virginia Tech team is, are they who you thought they were, or are they about where you thought they would be, or have they underachieved?
I think they're about where they thought they would be. Okay. And J.T. Thompson was a big loss at the beginning of the year. They're not deep. They're not experienced. They've got some. They don't have a Malcolm Delaney that can just go off and score 25 points for you when you need it this year. Those guys are still figuring out those roles, and they're relying on a lot of freshmen and sophomores, and Victor Davila, who's you can't count on to score. I mean, he's a good player, can score, but you can't count on getting 15 to 18 out of him every night. So I totally agree with what you're saying before, though. I mean, the complaining is one thing. Don't get housed by Boston College at home.
Right.
And in the last week of the season, they complain about not getting in. I mean, they win that game, they're in last year. So that's my mind.
I'll bring it back to the Big South to close. Are there any coaches that you see maybe that's a next hot thing? I don't want to say going to coach Virginia Tech or anything, but ready to make a move up to a conference? And is there anybody on the hot seat as we get ready to conclude the season?
Well, I think the 2 guys on the hot seat are Randy Peel down at Winthrop, and he seemingly has been on the hot seat for 4 years now, ever since Gregg Marshall left, because I think the Winthrop fans are a little puzzled by the inconsistency down there. Yes, they had been to 2 NCAA tournaments since Marshall left, but they were both, especially the second one was kind of catching fire at the end and then scoring 40 points against Arkansas Pine Bluff in a play-in game. So I think he's in trouble. Scott Cherry might be in some trouble at High Point because he hasn't done anything to make the people down there think that Art Lundy was there was a reason to get rid of Art Lundy. Cherry just hasn't done anything with some pretty good players down there. So I would think he'll probably get another year, but he's got to be under some pressure to do some things. And then it's funny because you think about as far as up and coming coaches, this isn't really a league right now with those guys. And Biedenbach's at Asheville, he's in his 16th year there. Cliff Ellis is in his however many 33rd, 34th year as a D1 coach at Coastal. I think he likes that job. Robbie Lang at Campbell's in his 9th or 10th year. That's been his only job. He's a guy that possibly could get a look. Barclay Radebaugh at Charleston Southern might be the guy in that mix that probably gets a pretty good look down the road because he's done some pretty good things at a program that is very limited in resources and whatnot. He's got them playing well. And then the other guy that eventually will be kind of an up the ladder sort of guy is Chris Holtman at Gardner Webb, because if he can win games there, that's a tough place to win basketball wise too.
Chris, as always, we appreciate the time. We'll do it again very soon, and as always, keep up the good work with the News in Advance.
All right, Bob. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Chris Lang on the Sports Buffet.